Speaking of the Cavaliers, they did it! Finally! 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 I don't know what took them so long after the season, but JB Bickerstaff is done bickering with his staff. Because in the words of a
Oh
man
my
who
God.
in the words of a man who we are no longer allowed to say on air, you're fired. JB Bickerstaff is out as the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. You know, I was over the moon about this move. It only took him 2 years in my eyes.
Yep. And as of right now, Kenny Atkinson seems to be the leading
And
candidate.
that I don't get.
The other name I've heard is some head coach or assistant coach for the New York Knicks.
I heard that too.
I forget his name. My personal choice, I know he was ousted from Golden State and Steve Kerr took him over the finish line, but I would look at Mark Jackson as our next head coach. I really would. Because, again, I get that it was Steve Kerr that, like, took what Mark Jackson started and finished it off, but Golden State would not be where they are right now if it wasn't for Mark Jackson. So
I think there's a reason why Mark Jackson hasn't been a head coach yet in 10 years, and I think he's kind of been out of the game for too long to be a head coach. It would remind me a little bit of the John Gruden situation when Gruden came out of the booth to come back and coach the then Oakland Raiders. You know, it was a good idea in theory. It didn't obviously work for very long.
yes, but that was because of off the field stuff with all those
Well,
emails.
are we sure about that? It wasn't working on the field either.
Fair enough.
So, in my opinion, the name that has not been talked about, and maybe it's because he's been the head coach for so many times, and again, I don't understand why this man keeps getting fired because I think he's a very good coach. He has a championship ring, albeit it was with the Lakers in the bubble.
No, don't say it.
I want Frank Vogel.
No.
Frank Vogel is good with bigs. He's a defensive minded head coach. He will know how to get the most out of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen if they decide to keep him. He's been to Eastern Conference Finals with Indiana, those young Paul George teams. He did, in my opinion, what he could with that mess of a Phoenix Suns roster. I wouldn't even have taken that job. He's coached star players. He's coached LeBron. He's coached Kevin Durant. He's coached a young Paul George. I think Frank Vogel, who, he coached the Pacers before. He's been in the Midwest. He is an experienced grown up. He checks every single one of my boxes.
No, thank you. I do not want Frank Vogel as our head coach because there's a reason he's gotten fired so many times.
Well, you want to tell me what it is? Because I can't figure it out.
For me, I think he just loses touch with his players. It seems like they start to turn on him. I think that's what he.
The only other thing I can think of is in the NBA, you fire a coach if he looks at you wrong. I mean,
wasn't he briefly the head coach in Orlando too?
He was in Orlando, and that was a disaster. I'll say that. But then he goes to the Lakers, and they have the season before the bubble where they were going to probably win the championship. That was the consensus pick. That was LeBron's best team in LA. And then, he goes to Phoenix, and, as I mentioned, he does what he can with that roster. My good buddy, Austin Arnold, who was on my podcast last Friday, and I had this discussion, and he is all set in on the guy who is currently broadcasting on ABC, who is supposedly the weak candidate for the Los Angeles Lakers job.
JJ Redick.
JJ Redick. He thinks a young guy with a new voice, even though he doesn't have any coaching experience, he doesn't think that matters so much in basketball. He just thinks that JJ Redick would be a young guy that would relate to these players. I don't know. It'd be a risk. The way I see it, whatever Donovan Mitchell wants, if he wants Kenny Atkinson, who I don't think is a great coach, but if he wants him, that's who the Cavs are going to get.
So, the name escapes me, but the assistant coach in New York, who I've heard is also a top candidate, I believe he was in Utah and has experience working with Donovan Mitchell. So, think that's why he's in the discussion. So, but again, like you said, it's whatever Donovan Mitchell wants. But to tie in Golden State here again, and we'll get to the Warriors more in a minute, but I've heard the Warriors are interested in Jared Allen, and the Cavaliers are also interested in Andrew Wiggins. Could I interest you in a Jared Allen for Andrew Wiggins trade?
Am I going to shock you? I think that'd be a terrible trade.
Really?
I think that would be a terrible trade. I'm
For
still on
both?
the. I
Wait,
would.
for
No,
answer
it'd
me
be great
this.
for Golden State. I think it'd be terrible from the Cavs side.
Interesting. Please
I
explain.
I don't want Jared Allen traded. I am the only person in the world that still says Evan Mobley is a power forward in this league, and I will hold that to my grave that I think over an 82 game season he would be worn down as a center. Gain 10 pounds, gain some body mass, and prove me wrong, but I still think you have seen moments this year where Mobley and Allen could work together. The key to me is Mobley's got to become a better shooter. That to me, you don't need to trade Allen. Evan Mobley needs to become a better shooter from outside. He needs to become what Carl Anthony Towns does because I think you could, to some degree, replicate what Minnesota has. Donovan Mitchell is your Anthony Edwards. Jared Allen is a better offensive Rudy Gobert, in my opinion. Could Evan Mobley be a poor man's Carl Anthony Towns? Absolutely, he could.
But are you sure you want to replicate what Minnesota is doing? Because it's not working.
Well, are we sure it's not working? They just took down the defending champs. They got beat by a great Dallas team that shot the L out of the ball. And I think that mostly was because Anthony Edwards got tired late in games because he's 22 years old. Minnesota is going to get to the finals. Now, they may have to move some pieces because of financial, but I think if they were to keep this team together another year or two, they would get to the finals.
If I'm Minnesota going into game 4 tonight and possibly a game 5 on, I believe game 5 would be Thursday back in Minnesota,
Correct.
I would start Naz Reid instead of Rudy Gobert.
Well, again, to me, though, Jared Allen's a better defensive player than Rudy Gobert. I'm saying the formula would be there. I think you'd have a better version of it.
I could see it, but
I think the guy you have to move is Garland. That's the guy you move. You get a bigger guard, whether you want to move Mitchell to the point or you get a bigger point guard. That would be the move to me. And Andrew Wiggins, when's the last time he was healthy? 2-3 years ago. He was great for Golden State in the championship run. Then he mysteriously had some deaths in the family. He was away from the team. He hasn't been right in 2 years. There's a reason to me why Golden State's trying to trade him.
if I'm the Cavs, and let's go with the idea of trading Darius Garland, I'm calling these teams. I'm calling the New Orleans Pelicans. I'm calling the Washington Wizards. I brought this up to you before. I'm calling the LA Clippers, and I'm calling the Chicago Bulls.
Hold on. Who the hell are you going to get from the Wizards?
Kyle Kuzma.
He's not the difference maker.
Yes,
No, he's not the difference maker.
I
don't even think Brandon Ingram's the difference maker for this team. You know who would be a difference maker for this team? And you're not going to get him, but he's number 23 and he lives in Los Angeles. That is the type of star caliber player this team needs. Brandon Ingram's a nice player. I would even say to some degree Paul George, who I would like over Brandon Ingram, but I don't think you're going to get him.
That's why I mentioned the LA Clippers.
That is the type of player you need. And I think Ingram is a step below, and I think Kuzma is even a step below that. You're not going to win a championship if your third best player is Kyle Kuzma.
I think that's because he's been stuck in Washington. Wait. Think about this. Before the trades, before Dallas made the trades to get Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, did you think the Mavericks were a championship contender?
No.
And they go out and get PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. Where were those two playing? Oh, I don't know. Charlotte, and Washington.
By the way, I didn't even think Dallas was a championship contender until they got to this series.
But a lot of people, once the Mavericks made those two trades, people were like, "Oh, the Mavericks could be title contenders now." So, when you go from a losing situation like a Washington, like a Charlotte, like Portland, for example, I could go on and on. It changes your mentality. If you get Kyle Kuzma into a winning type situation with a Donovan Mitchell, with an Evan Mobley, potentially a Jared Allen, he could be a difference maker.
I would say this: he was there in LA. How'd he do? Not great.
That's because he was alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis.
Okay, he's going to be alongside Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. What's the difference?
I think he would be better suited to play alongside Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley instead of LeBron and Anthony Davis.
By the way, this all hinges on: do you think Mobley can become your second best player? I still don't know that. I think a lot of his points against Boston were in garbage time because Boston didn't really care.
Yeah, and a lot of this is contingent on whether Donovan Mitchell resigns, which everybody at this point is saying yes, Donovan Mitchell is going to resign. But you know what I say to that? It's all just pure speculation until that contract is signed. I get it. He's, making Instagram posts like, look, celebrating Cleveland and stuff. And, he said how much he loves the city and all that. For me, it's all pure speculation until that contract is signed.
And here's the other thing: what's going to stop Mitchell from signing the 4 or 5 year deal and then a year later ask out if the Cavs play him out again?
Yep, exactly.